Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4IS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well. And from Discord, we've got another question today
Yeah.
from our very good friend, Ollie Atlas.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked today, how would promotion work in a socialist workplace?
Mm. Mm.
Very interesting question.
It is. It is,
I thought we
actually.
should discuss it today because you, I guess maybe it's one of those things that you might pitch something like horizontalism or a cooperative, and it might
Yeah.
be something that genuinely maybe somebody who doesn't understand leftist politics or progressivism, they might turn around and be like, yeah, like a cooperative sounds great and all, but I want to up my skills. How does
Yeah.
promotion even work? Like, I can
Yeah.
only imagine it within hierarchy. How does
Yeah.
that even work? And
Yeah.
you know what? Let's tackle that today because I think it's worth a try.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But I would suggest, as you've already alluded to it, that if you're going to throw around words like cooperative and horizontalism for us, I'm hoping you're going to back it up with some type of definition for us to work with you.
Oh yes, and I'm very happy to do that because I looked them up on Copilot and got I also got some sources just in case people were wondering that I'll share with people later.
Hey, how dare you?
And like, okay, this first one obviously isn't it isn't part of the Copilot spiel, but a cooperative is as simple as the workers are the ones that own the means of production. So, the business itself, and, they work out, how to produce, what to produce, and what to do with the profits, or what to do with the business. Um,
Outrageous.
it's that simple, that concept. But now let's kind of go into that other word I threw around, horizontalism. So a horizontal or flat work structure minimizes or eliminates hierarchical layers of management. Instead of a top down chain of command, decision making is distributed among workers, often through consensus or democratic voting. Roles may still vary in a function, but not in power or privilege. This structure is common in worker cooperatives, some non-profits, and experimental organization models like holocracy. Holocracy I probably won't go into because it's like this experimental new age. Um, Honestly, a lot of I think it's Zappos that do it. It's like, in short, it's that you kind of work in circles, and somebody takes the leadership role, and then in a different circle in a different project, somebody else takes um, a leadership role, and like you're deliberately supposed to. It's supposed to be autonomous, like all the different projects, and you kind of work through them. It's not as established as cooperatives or horizontalism, so we might just put that to the side. Um, but yes, in the conversation today, obviously to answer what Ali Atlas was saying to us, how would a promotion work in a cooperative or a horizontal business, a flat structured business?
Mm.
So in a horizontal a workplace, promotion does not necessarily mean rising above others in rank. Instead, it often involves role diversification, taking on new responsibilities, or rotating through different roles, skill development, gaining deeper expertise or cross functional abilities, increased influence, so participating more actively in strategic decisions or mentoring others, recognition by peers, being acknowledged by contributions through democratic processes. So, I guess with those specific 4 points that I just mentioned, I think what it's fundamentally referring to is, I think we've gotten used to, in hierarchical structures, it's like, okay, like almost like a zero sum game where, hey, in order for me to kind of go through my life, and for me to up my skills, in order for me to get
To climb the
better at,
corporate ladder.
yeah, to climb and have a better quality of life, I need to start as an entry level person, and then just slowly work my way up
Hmm.
via, I don't know, bringing X amount of productivity. So my boss turns around and says, you know, great, Mr. E, you're such a great person. That one spot we have from promotion, you've done so well, so you get it.
So, like,
And
instead of just productivity, you need to know how to kiss the right proverbial and suck up to the right person and know the right people as well. So it's not just about your skill set and your productivity. It's not just a meritocracy, is it? 4IS. It's
well, see,
also
that's the thing about meritocracy that nobody really mentions, is that well, look, it's starting it's starting from the individual and then going into a collective, where I think horizontalism does it the other way,
mm,
around. Now, with a traditional hierarchical structures, it, like, I guess the pitfalls of it go into what you were referring to before. It's not what you know. Like, obviously, what you know is really important, but what's also important is who you know. If you if you like if you have a very good relationship with your manager,
mm.
maybe that's the reason why you get it rather
You
than your
get it.
skills.
That's right. Damn right it is. And can I just say, you pointed on something before, or you touched on this idea of it's a zero sum game, this
Mm,
feeling of climbing the corporate ladder and like existing in a hierarchical employment scenario. It's definitely like that in the rat race of life, that climbing the corporate ladder style of living that many people are subjected to throughout the global economy and in various organizational structures. And it really does feel like a zero sum game. Like if you end up being lucky enough, the stars align for you and you've kissed the right ass and you've been productive, it can be about your productivity as well and your skill set. But like if you've been productive enough at the right time in the right place, all that sort of stuff, you know, if you get promoted, because like it's a pyramid,
mm,
that's a zero sum game because there's somebody else that doesn't, or there's a whole bunch of people that don't if you keep climbing up the ladder because it gets
yeah.
narrower and narrower as you get up. There's less and less opportunities. So like if you take one, somebody else loses out or a whole bunch of people do. So like I really think that concept is crucial in
Mm,
analyzing the existing style of totalitarian structures
yeah.
in the current capitalistic way of organizing the private sector or even the government sector, like organizations generally. It is total control from the top. And like the further up you go, the less chance anybody else has. And that sort of feeling, while like, many people will say that's the type of competitive environment that breeds success. It is potentially, that is very true. That does this type of competition, this coercive style of competition breeds success. But we also know fundamentally that when humans are in organizations like corporate structures, there's also a lot of cooperation that needs to go down. It's not all just
Yes.
fierce dog eat dog world competition. Someone like Graeber would even say that like most organizations run off a lot of communism because there's a lot of stuff that
Mm,
people kind of do that they don't really actually get paid for directly. They don't exchange everything for a dollar. They actually do a lot of extra stuff too, a lot of social relations, a lot of interactions that they do and build in an organization that's got nothing to do with being paid for it.
yes, and maybe this might lead into a possible structure in terms of promotion that we can kind of discuss,
Mm,
because I want to base it off. some, MNFPs that I've worked for, where I actually think that 80% of the work that I've done in these organizations is horizontalism, and it's that last 20% is that's like hierarchical.
Yeah.
But the point I want to make before we kind of go into that is that well, yeah, it's reinforcing what you were saying before about the cooperation, because really, like, let's just look at something like Utopia. Like, the classic case of the TV show Utopia is, you know, people, different departments coming together and going into a meetings, and like the zaniness, and I guess um, maybe for people that have done white collar jobs, that like the reason why it's so painful is that everyone goes into that meeting, but with the intention of doing something, but then nobody kind of wants to put up their hands because don't want to do unnecessary extra work that like puts pressure on themselves, because much more focused on the individual rather than the collective. And then what ends up happening is the meeting not really doing that much, and it just goes full circle and you're back where you started, and then you have to schedule in another meeting to do what the first meeting was supposed to do. So I guess where that's leading to is maybe, rather than have starting the collective and then going to the individual, is like one of the organizations that I work for in an NFP. What they did was, it's slightly unrelated, but I kind of want to put it into the horizontalism aspect of things. Is they did a pretty cool thing where it was like non financial recognition. So you deliberately, like, don't get me wrong, but they put it on the employees to go like, hey, these are the five categories of excellence, whether it's like a great collaborator, like a great performance in their area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And put your nominees forward for the various departments that you're in. They're recognized at, say, the next monthly meeting, and if they happen to be a winner, they kind of get a reward. Like, obviously it was non-financial focused, but to be completely honest, if you were to put that into a horizontal structure of, say for example, you have Joe Block, that's part of HR within the cooperative business, the guy that kind of works along with the other teams in order to hire the necessary people that you need for the field. You can have like a recognition, I don't know, maybe half yearly thing where the department says, hey, Joe Blogg's been doing great. He's been doing this. He's been doing that. He's been doing that. Hey, finance department, he was helping you out with this. Hey, marketing department, he was helping you out with that. You know what? I think he's a pretty good candidate to, because he said that he was interested in crossing between HR and marketing. Maybe he should be, since he's interested in that, maybe he should learn off Jane Smith, and he can do a cross collaboration, and he can learn much more about the business and also get much more further involved in the business.
So
And
are you arguing here then, for us, just so I'm across this,
yeah, yeah,
that in a socialist workplace, in a cooperative style environment,
yeah.
the ideal of promotion would be like cross pollination with other areas of expertise or skill set in order to further develop your abilities within that organization, so you get more experience from somebody else's work, basically. And that would be a form of promotion in and of itself, because you're furthering your skill set. Is that right?
Well, I think that's a great metaphor, because what I think, this is kind of what I got from my own research, because like I was reading like what were the works? Yeah, the market and workplace in a democratic socialism by Mike Beggs. There was We Can Craft a Workable Workplace Democracy for a Socialist Future from the Jacobin magazine.
Hmm.
Dual Power and a Strategy to Build Socialism in Our Time from the Democratic Socialists of America. Like what they were kind of discussing, which is maybe what you were pointing out, is, well, as soon as you get away from hierarchy and focus on competition, so, the scarcity mindset where it's like, oh, hey, um, my name is Joe Blog, and I not only do I have to do really good at HR to improve Jane Smith, my boss, but I don't know, maybe I can take Jane Smith out for a corporate lunch and that sort of thing. Maybe butter her up a bit, and if I'm really lucky, in the end of financial year review, she might put me up for promotion.
Mm.
Rather than that, it starts with a collective, and it's like, hey, is this something? Is this role that you went for to join this organization? It's something that you're really passionate about. What's in a related department to what you are doing? Marketing, for example. You're interested in these aspects of HR and these aspects of marketing. How about you learn off Jane Smith, learn the ropes. Maybe you can kind of teach John Grace some aspects about HR that he's also interested.
Mm.
And once you're building this collaborative nature, um, let's say, for example, something that like it's the baseline of an organization, but I find sometimes in hierarchical systems it just completely falls flat. If you have collaboration, what's great, which a lot of organizations do badly: communication.
Mm.
As soon as you're collaborative, rather than like, oh, finance wants me to check X, Y, and Z, and I've got all of these tasks in order to do. How do I get out of finance making me do this extra work? Like, if there's an understanding that, Monday to Thursday, you're doing your job and everyone's happy to help you out in order to do your job. And then on Friday, oh, hey, we've got the half yearly promotions that are coming up. You know what? Joe Blogg's been doing well because I've seen a valid precedent that if I put in the necessary work, I know the judge of character of Joe Blog, that if I've actually put in the right work, he will reciprocate for me, because I'm happy to put a foot forward in a collaborative nature because others in the organization have put a foot forward in a collaborative nature.
Mm.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would consider that a pie in the sky stuff, but as soon as you switch from competition to collaboration, suddenly that kind of baseline communism aspect that David Graeber talks about, it opens possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. See, when it comes to competition in what understand is a socialist workplace, I guess there are two kind of paths that we could go down with this discussion. One of them being the one that I think we've already taken, which is somewhere along the lines of, okay, within the existing system, a capitalist system, you can have organizations that tend towards a socialist structure because they are the negation of a traditional capitalist style organization, which is hierarchical and relies on kind of the traditional corporate structure, like with a CEO, a board of like executives, and then like shareholders that hold them to account. And so like you go down the cooperative route, which is you don't have privateers owning and controlling the company. You have the workers doing that, but that's within the capitalist system.
Yeah.
So they are still working within the pressures of a capitalistic environment. The other path that you could take with a discussion like this is to, I guess, hypothesize as to how an organization within a socialist society would operate. So you're not taking a special organization that's in the heart of the lion's den, so a socialist organization, and throwing it into the heart of capitalism and seeing how that flies. But like, you're actually saying, okay, we've established a socialist economy. It's planned.
Yeah.
We've eradicated the capitalist class. The workers own the means of production. What does that look like? And then, so what do the individual workplaces look like as a result of that? And so, like, if individual workplaces looked like something along the lines of what you had in, maybe the Soviet Union, where you would have had, in the early days anyway, workers controlling the workplace and then nominating delegates from their workplace to go and represent in the local Soviets, so the local councils, to run the place in line with kind of the political organization that was the actual party bureaucracy that ran the general politics of the nation. So that's a very different scenario, because in that situation, promotion in your workplace would look like something like, okay, we're all kind of working here together, and maybe it's a horizontal organization, maybe it's not, maybe it is hierarchical, but it's democratic. So if it is hierarchical, everybody gets into their positions because they were elected to those positions, and then promotion from that workplace outside of the actual democracy of electing a hierarchy of positions within the hierarchy would be like, hey, out of all the people in this place, we actually think you're the best person to, as a delegate, to represent us and our interests in the broader economy. So we're going to promote you amongst all of us to go and meet in the, local governmental structure that, kind of organizes governance in this region or at the federal level, and you're our delegate from our workplace. See you later. We've got all our faith in you. Good luck. And if you can't handle it, just tell us and we'll replace you with someone else. Or if you don't do what we think you should be doing as a delegate, we'll recall you straight away. So promotion in that type of system, where you have an alternative form of government altogether, it's not bourgeois government anymore. It's a government that's controlled by the workers, and the workers meet to kind of govern society. And maybe you're sending delegates off, and maybe promotion in that environment is like, out of all of us that work here and control the means of production in this workplace, we think you're the most capable to represent us politically. And so like, you go off, you're promoted from amongst your peers to represent the interests of your cooperative, your group of workers.
Yes, and I probably, the extra point that I would add to what you were saying there is what's important to that compared to, say, a much more traditional hierarchical structure is, oh, hey, I'm Joe Blog, and going I'm going to the position of CEO. Here's my fancy resume. Shareholders, board of directors. I swear I'm a good candidate for the job. Whereas with what you're saying, you can say that there's a certain hierarchy there. However, it is probably much more of a justified hierarchy because of how democratic it is.
Yeah.
We're saying that Joe Blog is the delegate that goes to the workers' councils of the Soviets to represent ABC company, because we think he's the most qualified person. He understands the business enough that he can represent our interests.
Yes, in the economy. Right.
Yes.
Right. And like, that is a very different form of discussion about promotion than you have in a horizontal organizational structure that exists within a capitalist system. Because there are no additional things going on there. There's just like, okay, we're a horizontal structure and we have to somehow survive within a capitalistic society. And like when you have a look at like places that do this horizontal stuff, like Yanis Varoufakis speaks about an organization that he worked for. Somehow it's associated with Steam. It's some type of company that works on, like, I'm not much of a gamer, so I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
this, but this group, but there's a company that owns Steam, and they are a horizontal organization. And, but like they're not actually horizontal because the people that like founded the organization, they have figured out the corporate structure in a way that they really have the majority shareholding, and
Right,
like they kind of basically have the final say. But like their company structure on paper and the way that they write like how the company works to new employees and stuff is just like, hey, you've been picked because you've got skills. Okay, you got this far because you've got skills. You come to work and you work. Do whatever you want. If you want to go work over there, you want to go set up a team and work on this, do whatever the hell you feel like, because you're a competent individual and an employee and you're going to contribute to the organization. And like people will get together and judge you. That's how we will decide whether you get a pay rise. And like if people think that you haven't been contributing enough, they're probably not going to vote for you to get a pay rise and stuff like that. And like generally that's how the organization works. People set up
right,
projects and they kind of work on things autonomously, and like they try and convince other people because of their prowess and their clout that they should work with them, and like they convince other people to work on projects, and sometimes projects fail because people started here but then they lost interest in it. So like it's very dynamic and it's outside of that usual structure
mm,
where it's just like a manager has proposed something and everyone has to row in the same direction. Like people have to kind of organize themselves spontaneously and like carry that through based on sheer will and determination. And so it's all horizontal except for those, you know, a couple of people that actually own the organization. When, you know, push comes to shove, the
mm.
buck stops with them. And so like for the most part, it's horizontal, but it's really existing in a capitalistic environment. So like no one's going to get promoted to be, you know, the original founder of that organization and like live as a billionaire basically, because the real owners of this organization, like, you know, spend most of their time on a private yacht somewhere, floating around the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
But like, and so like that's a horizontal structure, and like, but it's in a capitalistic setting. And so, like, you know, you can analyze that all you want and say, well, you know, this is probably how it would work in a socialist workplace, because it's socialist, because it's anti-capitalist. But, like,
mm,
you know, it's still within a mode of production based on capitalism. What I think would be way more interesting is kind of the thought experiment, like in a socialistic mode of production, where
mm.
the means of production have been seized and there is an end to bourgeois democracy and there is workers' democracy. What would a socialist workplace look like, and how you would promote people, or whether you would even use the word promotion, which is what I was saying before. If you choose someone amongst your peers, a group of peers,
Mm.
to represent you as a delegate to try and ensure that you have a voice in the governance of society because you have an economic interest in it now as a workplace, and you want to choose someone of amongst your peers that's going to represent you because you've dealt with them before and you like the cut of their jib, or like, you know, um, Jess over there, she's worked with him and she speaks highly of him. So like you're gonna, you know, go with Jess's recommendations because you trust her, and there's no hierarchy in that. It's just, it's a promotion, but it's actually like kind of along the lines of what you were talking about before. It's promotion based on taking an additional responsibility, actually.
Yes.
And so, like, the promotion in and of itself is not the promotion in the capitalistic sense, which is the dog eat dog world competition, zero
Mm.
sum game stuff that we were talking about
Yeah,
here, which is
yeah.
like, you know, whether I feel morally okay with this or not, promotion for me means I get more and you get less. But promotion here is actually I take on an additional function that means I am now a spokesperson for
Yeah.
my colleagues. Like that is an additional responsibility. And like there is some nobility that comes with that for us. And so like the priorities in a socialistic mode of production might be like very different and incomprehensible for us
Yes.
living in a capitalistic mode of production. And like the idea of promotion, the P word might not even be used in that setting. Because like if you think about like what Marx and Engels would have envisaged after the Paris Commune in 1871, which forced them to revise a lot of their theories about like what a communist society would look like. And I think they went back to, they revised the Communist Manifesto based on the Paris Commune. And like what happened in the Paris Commune was like everybody was paid a worker's wage. And so like whether you were a member of parliament or so like, you know, you got together and you were an elected representative in the government, or if you worked in a factory or you were a baker or like whatever your position was, you were a local magistrate, like you got paid a workingman's wage. And so in a socialistic society, let's just say, and everybody is kind of given basically an equitable wage, if that is how they sort themselves out, then promotion, the P word, doesn't have the bells and whistles associated with it that you expect from a typical corporate structure, which is the higher you get, the more pay you get, basically. And that's where the promotion comes. I'm not saying that it doesn't come with extra responsibilities. In a lot of cases, it does. In some cases, you know, it doesn't actually. The higher you go, the less work you do, and you just sit around in meetings and tell other people what to do. Doesn't mean that doesn't come with pressure, but maybe you don't have the same workload, but you definitely get paid more. And so, like, I would have thought, based on like the vision of someone like Marx and Engels, that you don't actually get compensated anymore, depending wherever you see it.
Yeah, you know, I'm very glad you kind of brought up that point that like even if you get promoted, there's scenarios within our world where you mightn't do as much work as you did before, or you mightn't do any work.
Yeah.
Because I think
everybody's dealt with that one before.
Well, no, but I guess like what comes to mind when I'm thinking about that is, you know, failing upwards, like, you know, ScoMo, like, you know, the whole 5 hidden ministry stuff for him, and like everyone. Like, look.
For the non-Australian listeners out there, Forias is referring to an old prime minister of ours failing incredibly upwards all the way to the highest political post in our country.
Like I kind of forget the Friendly Geordies video of it, but like, you know, head of tourism, you know, where the bloody hell are you? Don't get me wrong, very iconic within Australia, but like, you know, swearing in that ad made sure that certain sections in like I think the Asian regions where that ad was targeted, like it tanked. So like he did terribly as the tourism head of tourism, and then obviously he came over to politics, and you know he was involved in the whole like scandal with the social services, the robo-debt stuff. He was very much heavily involved in all of that, and then obviously everyone remembers the Black Summer bushfires. I don't hold a hose, mate. And he went off to Hawaii. So let's face it, that is someone who got promoted many times and probably did less work. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And like, just to kind of circle back when you were talking about horizontalism, you know, I guess in the capitalism node, before we talk about what it means to be in like a socialist mindset, I would say that horizontalism is much what you were kind of saying before about a justified hierarchy. Is that like it's not that everyone is equal within the organization, everyone kind of does the same role. I kind of feel like there is a justified hierarchy where, say, you have project Y and somebody's like, hey, this project happens to be in my field, you know, I'm happy to put my hand forward in order to be the project manager or the team leader in terms of this. And then everyone kind of you know, brings their expertise to that project, and you know, theoretically, that team leader that said, "Hey, this is my area of expertise," you know, they are the head of that project. However, in terms of the big decisions that need to be made, it's not him turning around and saying, well, I'm the team leader, we must do everything that we say. Like, it's taking those individuals that are involved in that, and eventually anything that affects the organization, it comes back to be democratically decided within the organization. Like, that justified hierarchy is then brought back to the collective, and then once the project is over, that hierarchy dissolves and it goes back to horizontalism. It's not necessarily, because I guess if you were looking at horizontalism prima facie, especially since we're so used to hierarchy, that would be like, yeah, but who makes the decisions? Need to, like, obviously you need a team leader in order to do X, Y, Z. It's like, yes, in a justified hierarchical way, sure. But like, eventually you kind of go back to the collective. You can be a group of individuals that goes off and does the project, but then you go back to the collective. Now, fun part, let's talk about the socialist aspect of things. And look, you brought up a really good point, because Ollie Atlas, I do apologize if you feel like in this way we're kind of not answering your question, but I think a really good point that you brought up is that, do we even use the word promotion anymore in a socialist context? Because we were talking about, like, I guess in my spiel that I mentioned before, like, let's go over those talking points broadly that I said, like, role diversification, skill development, increased influence, recognition by peers. Like, I guess maybe increased influence might sound similar to the old hierarchical way of doing things, but like, increased influence, at least in the hierarchical sense, is, well, you're getting more money, and I don't know, maybe if you want to think about it in a Machiavellian way, oh, you have more power within the organization as, I don't know, the head of a department, and oh, I get off, firing and firing people and all of that. But like, at least maybe in the socialist context, again, it's much more of that idea of, hey, I've started in this business. It's given a lot to me. I kind of want to give a lot back to it. This is kind of what I've been interested in. This is the entryway through it. Let me collaborate further. Oh, I'm growing as a person, and I'm realizing there's the other departments that I like, that what they do I find very interesting. And okay, I in the Friday meeting when we usually each work, discuss what to do next within the organization, and it's that 6 monthly period when people are talking about promotions, if you will, or maybe okay, let's call it something different. The next cross collaboration. I'm just kind of pulling that out of my arse. Like the cross collaboration review, and it's like, Joe Blog is he's part of HR. He's got interest in marketing. He's been showing us a great acumen in doing all of that stuff. Let's put his name forward. Let's see what other departments say as well, and we go with the best candidate. Because, like, if you think about it in that way, is it truly really promotion? Like, I don't know.
Well, it depends. Again, like, as you aptly questioned, what is the meaning of promotion in a society that's not capitalistic, and in a structure that is no longer based on the need to squeeze productivity out of people to increase profits, or judge productivity where it helps expand the enterprise or has some positive impact on the growth of the economy. And if the intent of work is not to produce surplus value for the expansion of profit and capital in money form, And now production actually comes down to something more along the lines of how do you convert surplus value, so surplus labor power, into something that is productive for society, not for private interests anymore, but like helps accumulate something that was missing that society needed before, or meets some type of quota that society was looking for, or gets you on some type of um, goal that is set by some type of 5-year plan, like a lot of the
Mm.
socialist countries have had in, like, the 20th century and stuff like that. It gets you further along your development goal. So it gets you further along in the space race, or gets you further along to developing more public housing, or a new way to kind of solve some social issue that you have. And like you've been directed as part of your organization, or your organization has voted and decided democratically that it wants to work on this project that is on the list of the things that society has planned for itself, then, like, you're going to have a very different kind of conversation in that regard about like what you should be
Mm.
doing and what you guys should be working towards. Because like if you've sent your delegate along to the regional or the federal government level, and like they've formulated some plan and you're happy to go with their vision, and now you're working on something, like I said, that just doesn't work in the name of profit, but works for some more long-term vision, like you're having
Mm.
very different discussions about what influence looks like in your organization, and what power looks like in your organization, and what are positive characteristics to promote in your organization. Maybe you don't want someone who's like very um what's the word, very aggressive, and not in like a violent way, but like just like really, they come on very hard and they're very, very pushy. And because like, they're used to having to meet all these deadlines because, end of financial year's coming and everyone wants to look good on the books. Maybe those type of people kind of start to fall away. And you have different
Yeah.
personality types now that start to rise to the top because they're the type of people that have longer term vision, as opposed to like looking at short term goals, which is a critique I know that you have largely of corporate structures in the capitalist system, is like they actually sacrifice their longevity a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So on the books, it looks like they've made, I don't know, they've had a good year. So
Yeah.
the shareholders are happy, where really what all they're doing is they're like cooking the books, or like they're making it look really good, and they're just like shifting numbers around. And like, in a couple of years time, that's going to fall like a house of cards and completely destroy the entire corporation. And like, this is
Yeah.
something that is prone in capitalism, is like, fudging the numbers now for short-term profits. And so, like, that sort of stuff naturally, if you're talking about like natural selection, that sort of attitude, that sort of personality trait gets promoted
Yeah.
in a capitalist system, right?
Yeah.
Like naturally, if you looked at this as like, a Darwin, use it like a Darwin's lens here in terms of natural selection and survival of the fittest, those people might rise to the top in a capitalistic system. But in a
Mm.
socialistic system, maybe those people aren't promoted anymore in
Yeah.
terms of like, they're not valued as much. And if any, actually they're considered dangerous, those
Yes.
personality types, because they might throw people off the longer term vision. And so like, it
Mm.
really does depend, I think, a lot about like how society structures itself and what value it puts on things. And like, could you imagine if like you had something like the Soviet Union in its early days with a 5-year plan? It's finally got its shit together. It's finished its civil war, or like the invasion from basically outside capitalist forces, and like it doesn't have to deal with that anymore. And it's just got like 5-year plan after 5-year plan, and they're just trying to develop their industry and advance their society in relation to what they see are workers' interests, as opposed to like getting caught in a Cold War situation after World War
Mm.
II. And like you have someone come in who just like wants to, you know, basically reduce socialism to socialism in one country and control that place like it's his own personal kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, like that, you have a completely different historical trajectory there, I think. And so like,
Yeah.
you really have to answer this question. It depends exactly what the intention of how would promotion work in a socialist workplace. What is the kind of the value structure of a socialist society? And if it's no longer profit and it's more like, yeah, like planning for things, and it's no longer kind of profit in the sense that the business needs to make the most money, because money is merely a medium of exchange as opposed to something that you accumulate in order to produce more capital.
Mm.
Maybe you start to think about your business operations very differently, and you're not thinking about accumulation anymore. You purely looking at efficiency, because like that example I used before that you always critique, a capitalist organization or a corporate structure is not very efficient if it cannibalizes itself in the short term just to make it look like it's made record profits again this year, and it
Yeah.
falls over next year or the year after that. That's not efficiency. Which is funny because, like, the one argument that everyone has about capitalism versus communism is like, it's just more efficient, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And like, maybe it is short term efficient,
Yeah.
but like maybe it's not long term efficient actually. And like efficiency would look very different in a socialist society as well. Efficiency would be like, let's use everything we produce and have zero waste.
Yes, and I'm kind of glad you stopped at the point of efficiency because, like, I'll slightly bring it back to something you said, like right at the beginning
Of my
of
rant.
your that you were making, where like, yeah, it's amazing with the 5 year plans that as soon as you're not focusing on profit, it does open a huge range of like possibilities because hey, let's say you have a 5 year plan of efficiency. Then all of a sudden, rather than focusing on profit, you can focus on what exactly do you mean by efficiency? Because sure, you could use your resources in, I don't know, a space race like um, magnitude of getting technological advancements out the door. However, maybe another aspect of efficiency that people might focus on is using all of your resources to the best of ability in order to help your workers. So I guess maybe we can look at, say, a socialist LLM where you have all your AI agents running around. That you have a business where nobody pretty much works on their day-to-day admin anymore because you got your AI agents running around doing all of that for you, and you only see, I don't know, the summaries or what you need to see, and it's like, oh, Joe sent me this update of the projects that they're going to. Oh, thanks, AI agent Smith. Just go off and let them know that we'll get X, Y, and Z sorted. And maybe because of that, they can spend, rather than an 8 hour day, maybe 4 hours on them working on their task because, I don't know, doing that admin work means they only have to work half the day. I'm
Mm.
just taking broad
Yeah,
sweeping
yeah, yeah,
statements here,
yeah.
but like suddenly you have a 4 hour workday rather than an 8 hour work.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
let's be a little bit more realistic. Say you have a maybe actually they do a study and they find out that admin work is 2 hours of your day.
Mm,
Maybe you
mm.
end up having a 6 hour work day rather than
Yes.
the eight, and that's the 5 year plan, and that's maybe the first year of the 5 year plan on efficiency, working
Mm.
to maximize workers' leisure, so they're not coming home tired because of the alienation from their work.
Yes. Yes. That's really interesting thought experiment territory for us,
Hmm.
because like all I could think about when you were saying that is like, what if that is actually the case, that like is it like a socialist ideal, I guess you would say, from a new form of society beyond a capitalistic one, is that like the working day would be reduced.
Mm.
And so like you would only work as much as the organization and like democratically elected to work. And so if you weren't judged off profit anymore and you were judged off efficiency, and you reorganize your workplace to be as efficient as possible to meet
Mm.
your planned targets, let's say, and like that meant you only had to work 20 hours a week instead of 40, then like, people might have completely different lifestyles as a result of that. Stress might be reduced significantly.
Mm.
And like in an environment where stress is not a factor, people do tend to start to cooperate a little bit more because they have the time and the energy to see eye to eye with other people. And if you have people that are more conducive to a cooperation, you have less need for hierarchical coercion to get people to deliver. And so
Mm.
like in an environment where people start to, yeah, work together a little bit more, you have less and less of a need of a reliance on any form of hierarchy, whether it's spontaneous and fully justified or not. People might just come in and like just say, what do you want me to do today? Or what needs to be done today? And everyone just works on a project together or works on the day's goal. And then once that's done, everybody just goes home. Like it might be just
Mm.
like I said before, like this sort of stuff might be completely inconceivable to us because like we're looking at the world through a capitalist mindset, and we need to be very cognizant of this idea that like we can really only imagine things with the filter that we look at the world at the moment. Like, humans are like the most, one of the most important qualities of the human is the ability to imagine things. So we can put ourselves in those situations, but like, it's really a singularity style event, changing the mode of production, in the sense that like beyond basically changing the mode of production to being one where you're no longer producing value simply for the sake of the expansion of profit anymore, but you're producing value for some other reason. So maybe we produce value now for social purposes, for a social target, as opposed to profit. That is really a singularity style event. Whereas in the sense that any real predictions about what that look like or might look
Mm.
like really lose their validity quite fast because no one can really accurately predict it because no one's really kind of experienced that very well before or has experienced it at all in 21st century terms. Like we've had a couple of dashes at it. I think there's some good cracks at it in the 20th
Mm.
century. So you could predict it with like the means of production and the industrial societies that we had in the 20th century. But, maybe it looks very different for an advanced society in the 21st century. And like,
Yeah.
especially with the rise of AI, like if they're really
Yes.
predicting the way that they are predicting it, that, like 2/3 of jobs are going to disappear because of AI, blah, 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 kind of thing, like in the future, maybe, AI efficient socialist workplaces are just like you monitoring some machines for an hour a day, like kind of thing. And that's a
Yeah.
socialist workplace. And like, the most stressful thing that you have to do in the day is like meet with a whole bunch of other people to talk about which button to press on the machine. Like, yeah, like you give me that, give me that problem any day for IS, like kind of thing. And so like that is more and more conducive to socialism, I think,
Mm.
when like you have less, I think, involvement of labor because it's been disempowered, let's be
Yes.
honest,
Yeah.
by the machine anyway. Like before, the power of labor really came down to the fact that like capitalists to have their products produced needed skilled laborers. If they
Mm.
were a capitalist that made shoes, they needed a shitload of people on the factory floor that knew how to put shoes together. And so like the
Mm.
power that the workers had was, hey, I know how to make shoes and you don't, you stupid capitalist, like kind of thing. And like the capitalists had the money, but they had the shoemaking skill. Now today, the workers in a shoemaking factory might just put the sole and attach it to the body of the shoe with a sewing machine or some glue. And there's not a lot of skill in that. So then like the power that the worker has compared to the capitalist is very much less than what it would have been 200 years ago.
Mm.
And so like you can only argue though that if like those workers though seize the means of production and then own the things that basically put the shoes together and all they had to do was glue every day, then they might decide, like you've been saying, that like really they might only have to work maybe a couple of hours a week and do some admin, and they can still produce enough shoes to meet the targets for whatever society's needs are for shoes, as opposed to making them for profit and over making shoes and flooding the world market with shoes. And then when there's too many shoes, we just throw that into landfill. And that was the most profitable way of doing it, though.
Yeah.
But like, is it the most efficient? And so, like, you know, in this world of efficiency redefined, promotion redefined, production itself basically redefined, then like you have to ask, like, how would you define promotion at all? And really, what would that look like? If it's in a more social environment, then I'm assuming, promotion takes on a very social function. And like we spoke last podcast about the dawn of everything and those primitive communistic societies of the Wendat nation and like the Native American populations. Yeah. Like, if you wanted to have social control in a society like that, like you spoke about it in the last podcast, and like I remember reading about it. If you wanted social control, you had to be very convincing.
Yes.
If you wanted anyone to do what you thought was a good idea, one, you had to convince them, and then two, you had to sustain that so it was worthy for them to stick around. Because if not, they got other shit to do.
Yes, and if you are encountering our podcast for the very first time, I do suggest you go back and watch our discussion with the dawn of everything, because that is a very good point. Like, maybe once, your 5 years plan, your 5 year plan, non-hierarchical structures anymore, and because you're being a lot more collaborative within the organization. Maybe, suddenly you can't be the manager and start stomping around, saying like, "Oh, do what I do, or you're fired." Like, that's obviously not a thing anymore. You can't be Donald Trump and point at someone and say you're fired.
You're fired.
You eventually have to take on new skills, and we've gone full circle where you would have to be far more charismatic and convincing and being like, okay, hey guys, I've got this project. I think it'll feed into our 5 year plan and make us more efficient. And like, okay, what's your proposal? Tell us, because otherwise we're going to go with Jack's proposals. So be convincing.
Yeah, because Jack's cutting my working week down to 5 hours. And unless what you're proposing is better than that, because I've got some serious Xbox to play, and like, I don't have time to work more than 5 hours in this week, because like, I've got a goal over here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there is other things to do in life, and like, it doesn't always revolve around employment. And so like, in a world where AI becomes prolific and like our automation becomes so intense that human labor really does take a back seat, and like it becomes redefined in and of itself, so does the question of whether we have to marry ourselves to spending most of our adult lives at the point of production, in whatever value form that is. I'm not talking about just like sitting on a production line, but like any type, like, service provision, or like being productive by providing your expertise on something as well. Like, it's not all about factory and coalface stuff here, or like being in a coal mine somewhere. Like, it could be anywhere across the economy. Like, do you really need to spend the entirety of your adult life being productive as such from an economic standpoint? And like, in a society where what that means is redefined economic output, then like, so many ways to go down this conversation for us. So many thought experiments within thought experiments within thought experiments.
Yes, but I honestly think that this has been an excellent discussion today.
It's been interesting.
Look, again, Ollie Atlas, if you feel like we've kind of sidestepped the question, please let us know in the comments. But like, I still think, I still believe that you brought up a really good point, that like, you can discuss like a cooperative or horizontalism within the capitalist structure. And then, of course, it obviously you therefore have to be like, oh, well, is it eventually going to be coercive because it needs to do what it needs to do in order to survive? Or you can take the much more interesting route of, wait, let's imagine the socialist revolution has happened, and you know, it a cooperative is going to exist in its best form,
mm,
and you have the delegates that go off and um, you're discussing whether your 5-year plan is about efficiency or about
mm.
something else,
Yeah.
and then it just flows down the chain where it's collaboration after collaboration after collaboration. Are you truly thinking about promotion anymore?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because I think it's a valid question, and also a valid reason to think maybe you're not.
Yeah. Like, what does the P word even mean?
Yeah,
Maybe it's adopted a new meaning. It wouldn't be the first time. Like, if you read like books from a couple hundred years ago, a few hundred years ago, sometimes there's words in there that you use today in a modern sense that, like, it obviously has a very different meaning back then. And they're probably using it in the original sense of the term, but it's shifted over time to mean something almost completely different. It's
yeah.
completely out of context now. So, like, these things happen when there are significant changes in society, and dare I say, a revolutionary change for us.
But yes, today has been a really good discussion. Don't worry, Ali Atlas, you can have a go at us in the Discord if we didn't answer your question finally. But of course, it leads to our very final segment. What's that synthwave art? So, Mr. E, do you want to have a crack at this?
Yes, I would like to say it is people with blindfolds and thick aviator glasses and strange black mustaches standing around deciding whether or not this only female looking figure in the room is going to get a promotion. That was the prompt, wasn't it, for us?
Oh, yeah. So the prompt was, it actually really pretty much was, how would promotion work in a socialist workplace where everyone is collaborating and
Oh,
working together?
right. So that's what all these random people standing around, basically not interacting with each other at all and all looking off, like, into nothingness, is supposed to depict collaboration. Of course. Of course. Of course. That makes total sense. Like, the AI, sometimes the AI is bang on, but this one is it's a bit disappointing, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm sorry, AI.
Look, I
Don't hold it
must.
against me.
No, no, no. The one thing about this collaborative organization that I
Yeah.
find very interesting is they've somehow managed to get the technological advancement of floating desks.
Yeah, floating desk. Like, I was wondering what she was doing there. But, like, maybe this is an organization just for blind people. And you know how, like, when you have a conversation with, like, a blind person or something, like, they
Yeah.
just look past you. Because obviously, for obvious reasons. So maybe they're all just looking past each other, but they're fully integrated into what's going on in that office right now.
It's a blind cooperative, is it?
Yeah, it's a blind cooperative. There it is. There it is.
Okay, and with that, thank you everyone for tuning in today. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And I will give off to you, Mr. E, to do the sign off.
Thank you very much, 4AS. And to all of you out there, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.